Hello Redhawks, and welcome to our next video in the accessibility series. In this video we're going to look at alternative text. What is alt text or alternative text? Basically it's just putting a short descriptive explanation of an image that explains the image's content or function. That allows the screen reader to then know what that image is and read that description to somebody who can't see the screen. Why is this important? Obviously, like we just mentioned, because of screen readers. If I can't see the image, if I have a general description of what that image is, it helps me to at least put it into some context. That's the most common reason that we would have alt text. Another reason, though, that sometimes is overlooked is if an image doesn't load for some reason, whether the link is broken, whether maybe we have our browser set up to not automatically download images because we have bad internet connection and it takes too long. That also at least gives somebody an idea of what should be in that place, even though they can't see the image because it didn't load for whatever reason. So let's look at some examples. So in this image, we have a bar chart that shows the rising enrollment from 2020 to 2024. So a good alt text would be to say essentially that, maybe include a few of the data points depending on how in detail we want to get, but bar chart showing student enrollment increasing from 1,200 in 2020 to 1,800 in 2024. What we don't want to do is just say chart or image of data. Now, if we have an image like this, what would be the best alt text to use? You might look at it and think several different things, but again, context matters in this situation. And sometimes the context is going to be implied based off of the content around the image. Sometimes our alt text, we can keep it relatively short because there should be something in the material that accompanies the image that could maybe provide some more detail. But looking at a couple different examples here, depending on what type of class we're in, might change what that alt text looks like. So if this is a culinary class, we're talking about decorating techniques, our alt text might reference that. So in this situation, a display case filled with elaborately decorated cakes showcasing piping and colorful toppings across multiple styles and tiers. If that's what we're talking about, then that's the reason you're showing that image is to show them those examples. But if we switch it up and put it into a nutrition class, now we would say maybe a bakery display filled with high sugar, high fat, high calorie desserts such as cakes and pastries. We're still talking about the same material, but we're using it for a different purpose. Even different than in a business course where maybe we're talking about displays and marketing, a well-lit bakery case showcasing a variety of colorful cakes arranged to attract customers, illustrating effective product display and visual merchandising. So all good versions of alt text, but depending on the context, obviously it would look different. But I would assume that we wouldn't, talk about decorating if we're in the business course, unless it was appropriate. But just to kind of display the example of how alt text can vary and give you some more examples of what a good alt text looks like, and then really focusing on the idea of what's the context of the image. Now, there are some scenarios where alt text might be a little bit tricky, especially in a testing situation where the alt text could potentially reveal the answer. So to kind of try to provide an example, the question might be to use a map of a mountain range to analyze the terrain and then come up with a feasible route to get to a certain point, and then justify your choice based off the contour lines and elevations on a map. So how do we take the map, not give away the answer, still give them enough information to go off of so they can answer the question, but without obviously stating the answer. So if we kept it short, like our alt text should be, we might say mountain range topographic map with steep slopes in the northwest, person on the mid ridge, and a river valley to the east at a lower elevation. So from there, we could tell at least, even not seeing the image at all, as they don't have one, we know where there's a steep area. We kind of know they're in the middle, and they got to get down to the east. It's a lower elevation, so you might talk about winding around. You might put this in a caption underneath the alt text, because alt text should be a little bit shorter, but you can, in a situation like this, you could expand it and give them some more detail. Again, we're explaining what the map kind of looks like, giving them some ideas, again, painting that picture for them so they could use it. If it was important to have, elevation points, then including a table in that situation assuming again it's accessible. There's a video on creating accessible tables as well. You could include those data points in the table. The screen reader would then read them, and they could use those as well. I apologize for this being a little blurry when we look at it, but I thought this was a good example that came from InStructure that I wanted to include, because sometimes we're not always sure, like, how do I include, when do I include, what should it be when it comes to alt text. So just kind of a flow chart. Does it convey meaningful information? If the answer to that is no, then we just mark it as decorative, which I'll show you how to do here in just a minute when we get into Canvas. But you could have an image that's just there to, maybe it's kind of related to the page, but it's not there to actually add any context to what's going on. So it's possible that we could just mark it decorative, and then a screen reader would just skip that image even exists, because if you were reading it yourself, you might just notice that it's there, realize, okay, that's a picture, and then move on. But if the answer is yes, it does have information, then we have to ask ourselves, is this a screenshot of a quote? Then we should just repeat what the quote is. I would say in that situation, sometimes we probably wouldn't even include that, but there are reasons why that kind of image may be put into a page. Is it a chart, graph, or data visualization? In that situation, we want to kind of make a brief alt text summary. What are we looking at? What is it trying to show? And then again, in the content, provide the data itself. So the chart doesn't, or the alt text for the chart doesn't necessarily need to have all that data in it. It should just kind of explain what the chart is, and then we should make sure that we include that information in a different way in case we have somebody with a visual impairment. Is it complex, like a diagram, infograph, or map? Then, we can summarize the purpose. We could potentially, again, provide a more lengthy description nearby or linked off to another page if we wanted to get into heavy detail that didn't really fit into the actual content of what we were reading. Is it used as a link or a button? So a lot of people have, images or buttons that they use for modules. Then it describe the function, module 1, module 2, unit 3, whatever it would be. And if it doesn't fall into any of those situations, then we just want to make sure we write effective alt text. Again, we want to try to keep it short and specific. 125 characters, kind of the general rule of thumb there, but it's not hard and fast. We just don't want it to go on and be too long-winded. Again, purpose of the image, not just what it looks like, and then avoid repeating surrounding text unless necessary. So again, if it needs to have a lot of description, that should come in the context of the text itself, not necessarily in the alt text. Okay, let's switch over here to Canvas. So I have a page opened up and I already have an image inserted. A couple different ways to go about putting our alt text in. One, you can see if you watch other videos, we already have the accessibility checker telling us that we have a problem, which is that we don't have alt text. And technically we do have alt text, but it's not right. So most accessibility checkers will pick up and say, like, this is not good alt text. But usually when it sees like a file name like this, like a .png or a .jpeg, it's going to say, wait a minute, that's not alt text, that's just the file name. Because by default, most programs will take the file name and put that in as alt text, so there's something there. So you need to update that. The other way we can get there is if we just click the image and go to image options. There's some other stuff in here to change sizes and things like that, but our alt text is here. So I could go in there and type in my alt text. In this situation, the image is showing where the publish button is located. So screenshot of a Canvas page showing the location of the button to publish content. This button is located in the upper right of any content that requires publishing. This section, the second sentence there, may not be needed depending on what the content in the page itself states. But I could include that even though it's a little bit long. But again, kind of showing where that's located, we would probably want to have that someplace in the page itself anyways, because we're showing what it looks like, but we're not really focused on location. So I might be able to leave that out depending on what the context surrounding the image is. If this image was for some reason just purely decorative, then that's when I can just click this box to make it a decorative image, and then it sets the code up so that the screen reader would know that it's a decorative image. It wouldn't skip over it. Once I go ahead and click done there and then come back, see I still have an accessibility situation, so I want to click on that, and I see that it just tells me that it shouldn't really contain more than 120 characters. So maybe I want to get rid of the second sentence there and figure out a way to implement that into my context, and then I get the all clear on my accessibility checker. If you get an accessibility pop-up like that because you have a few too many characters, that's not one that's big. The bigger thing is to always just make sure that we have alt text on images. Flipping back over to our slides to kind of wrap up here. Do's and don'ts, again, keep alt text short, 1 or 2 sentences in the 120-ish character range. Describe the purpose. We don't have to necessarily go into every detail. Details should probably surround the image in the context of the page itself. And again, write what you're going to say if you had to describe that image out loud. One thing we didn't mention but is important, you don't need to start with image of or picture of. Screenshot you might want to include just because then they kind of know like what it's coming from, like it's part of a screen, like the example that I showed. But the screen reader is always going to say that anyways. When it gets to an image, it'll say image, and then it'll start to explain. So you don't need to put image of because it'll say image of, and then it sounds awkward and it's just repetitive. And again, if you've heard screen readers and how slow they go sometimes, or just putting extra stuff in there that they don't really need to be able to hear. Make sure that you're not leaving out important context. Again, working that context into alt text all the time isn't always easy, but again, there's other ways to get the context surrounding the image, and don't use images as text unless you really need to. But there are some times where you could put an image into a page where there is just text. There's obviously situations where that would work. Just not something that we want to make a regular habit of. So hopefully that gives you a good overview and an idea of how to use alt text appropriately.